Yeah. So thank you all for being here. Please follow Bill's timely example and put your name, pronouns, what organization you're with in the chat. And I'll save the chat for later. But for those who may not know me, which I think is almost everybody, I'm Rabbi Bonnie Margulis. I'm the Executive Director of Wisconsin Faith Voices for Justice, and along with Worker Justice Wisconsin, we co-convene the Dignity at Work Coalition. And we are trying a new sort of format for these meetings. We are, from our last meeting last fall, we talked about the goals of the coalition and the ways that people interact with the coalition and the things that they get the most out of these meetings. And the two things that kind of rose to the top, people wanted to see us focus on one or two main issue areas, but they also found that it was very valuable sharing information with each other and hearing about each other's work. So we decided to try this new format where we would invite two organizations at any given coalition meeting, and we meet more or less quarterly, to present about their work and what it is that they do and whatever major issue areas they cover, and if they have any upcoming or ongoing campaigns or initiatives or programs, particularly with an eye to how other members of the coalition could help support their work or partner with them or help increase capacity by joining together. And then we wanted to sort of pose a framing question for those presentations, and then have time for breakout rooms so that people who are really interested in hearing more or diving more deeply into one of the organizations could be in a breakout with that organization, and those who are maybe more interested in hearing more and finding ways to partner with the second presenting organization would go into a breakout room with that organization. And then we wanted to come back for some more sort of broad general discussion depending on what was coming up around the state, which right now is the state budget. So that's why that's the second half of our meeting today, is a discussion about the state budget. We're really delighted to have Rec from MadWork presenting about the work that MadWork does. And we also wanted to take a little bit of time and present about dignity at work in general, and kind of the goals and the vision and the issue areas, and looking at this new format and how we want our member organizations to interact with this new format. I will sort of start us off. When we started the Dignity at Work Coalition, and it's been actually about 7 or 8 years now that we've been going. The idea was that we have all these different organizations that each work on very specific and in some ways very siloed areas. So we might have organizations that are working on transportation over here, and organizations that are working on childcare over here, and organizations that are working on paid leave over there, and organizations that are working on maybe housing. And I would go to meetings on all these different issues, and at some point somebody would always say, we're so siloed, and we would be so much more effective if we worked with other organizations that worked in other areas and were able to sort of connect the dots about the intersection between all of the different things that we work on and lift our collective voices and have that collective power. And I got tired of hearing people complain about that and not do anything about it. That's how the Dignity at Work Coalition was born. And we work on about 12 different issue areas. So it's equal pay, living wage, sustainable, predictable hours, paid sick leave, paid family leave, affordable childcare, access to public transportation, gender discrimination, racial discrimination, affordable housing, pension protection, and the right to organize. So that's sort of the constellation of issues that we work under. We don't necessarily pay equal attention to all of those issues at any given time, and very much kind of rely on and depend on our member organizations to bring to the coalition, here's a campaign that we're working on, here's an issue that we're focusing on. This is where we want the coalition to provide support and partnership and be part of what we're doing. So that's kind of the big picture. And my hope and my vision is that as we each do our own work, we call upon members of the coalition to work with us on whatever the issue is that we're focusing on. So, for example, the Wisconsin Council of the Blind and Visually Impaired did an amazing webinar last week on transportation, and particularly the need for transportation for non-drivers. And that's the kind of thing that the coalition as a whole could hear about, learn about what those issues are, see how it intersects with getting people to work, and why that's a worker justice issue. And so that might be something that we would want to learn more about and add our collective voices. So if the Wisconsin Council of the Blind and Visually Impaired perhaps is going to the Capitol to lobby on this issue, they could call upon the rest of the coalition and say, hey, that might not be your main thing. Your main thing may be housing, or your main thing may be paid leave, but come with us and help raise your voice for today on transportation, because that's the issue today. So that's kind of the big picture vision of how, at least I thought and hoped, that the coalition would work. So I'm going to turn it over now to Rebecca to talk about kind of this new format and how we hope that it'll work. Hey, Baltazar.
Ahí está.
So I am really excited to talk about this today because I think it is a potentially fruitful way for the Dignity at Work Coalition to move forward. So just for the sake of, so that's on everybody's minds, I put in the chat today's question. And today's question is, how does your organization make the most of limited funding to maximize impact? I don't know about you all, but as the Executive Director of Worker Justice Wisconsin, I think about that every single day, annoyingly so. And it's a question that we are asking at the Dignity at Work. So the Dignity at Work Coalition, as Bonnie already explained, is a coalition of many different organizations that are in one way or another focused on dignity at work or frankly, worker justice. And I came to Worker Justice Wisconsin about 3 years ago now. So that's when I came to Dignity at Work. And COVID hit like within weeks. And so as a coalition, we really focused on what was going on with COVID. We did some vaccine clinics, but more importantly, we talked about and really pushed hard for worker justice, particularly for immigrant workers, because the system of support was absolutely not there, even as these workers were. I don't think the country would have survived without these workers. So we focused our attention there. Now we are not in response mode. We are wanting to be proactive. And so we wanted to think, okay, what could we do as a coalition? We first looked at the possibility of having a couple focus areas and our partner or the coalition, organizations within the coalition leading those projects. It's a great idea. If the organization is already leading it, it works well. However, for the coalition to lead something is a huge challenge, and it pertains directly to the question of today. We have not only limited resources, we don't have any money that we pool together, right? We all we have is our time and our collective effort. We found that it was just very difficult for any of us, because we have limited capacity, to lead something that isn't already happening within our respective organizations. And this is how the topic of, okay, how do we move forward came into being. And the idea of, okay, what is this coalition? It is a place for all of us to come together, to talk about what we're doing in each of our organizations, and then to say, oh my goodness, you're working on that. Great. Let me lend my support here. You're working on this. Great. I'll lend my support here. So essentially, it's a place for us to come, talk about a common question, and then find out what each other is doing, and from there be able to make partnerships to support each other. So today we're going to hear from Rec, who is working with worker cooperatives, worker-led, worker-owned cooperatives, and it's great work. And maybe there's ways, well, we already partner with MadWork, so I know there's great things to be done there. But maybe you hear something, whether you're here today or you are listening through or watching the recording. You'll find ways that you can support Rec's work. And maybe in that conversation, ways that Rec can support your work. So just like this, the idea here is to come with a common question, and then to figure out how we can support each other's work to amplify what we are doing. So to answer the question, how does your organization make the most of limited funding to maximize impact? I will say for Dignity at Work is not limited, it is no funding. And the way that we maximize that is by talking to each other and seeing how our organizations can support each other. That's it.
Thank you. And I'm going to ask Janet to address how organizations can engage with this new format and new way of sort of sharing and working together and finding ways to partner.
I think part of that is an awareness of what each of us is doing. And thanks to Bonnie, she frequently reminds me when I post something out to the coalition that I most directly work with, which is the coalition, which is the Wisconsin Aging Advocacy Network, which is a coalition of people gathered around older adults and the priorities facing older adults. She'll say, gee, this would be a good thing to share with Dignity at Work as well. So once in a while I remember on my own, but Bonnie often prompts me because we work on issues like paid family and medical leave and expansion of that leave to include what looks more like a family today and not this traditional model of family. So those kinds of bills, transportation bills, what else do we work on that? So a number of the things that we identify are things that many other organizations within this coalition are working on, and something that we could all support one another on. And as I listen to the issues all of you raise, I think, wow, that's a really important issue. If it's not important to today's older adults, a lot of those issues will be important to tomorrow's older adults, right? Having good jobs, being able to work and save and have some retirement security doesn't start once you get older, right? That's the problem. We have to start much younger, and we have to make a pathway for folks to do that. So, it's hard to say that almost any of those issues don't impact our population in some way, shape, or form. The key is that we can't take the lead on all those issues, or we'd never get anything done, but we can support some of those efforts that others are doing. And we appreciate the support that you all give us when we're doing something. And so we have an advocacy day at the Capitol coming up in May, where we're talking about the workforce and family caregivers. Well, who isn't impacted by a shortage of direct care workers and family caregiving issues? So that's a really good example. We're also talking about transportation. We're talking about home delivered meals, or what many people would call Meals on Wheels of America. and our aging and disability resource centers, which are all over the state, providing, you know, some information that's not slanted in one way or another. They don't have a vested interest in the outcome, so they aren't going to have any financial gain if they're referring people to different places. And so it's really important as we all age, whether it's us, our parents, our family members, our community members, to know that there's somebody they can talk to who isn't trying to sell them a bill of goods, who's really going to help them understand what their needs are and what is available in their community to meet those needs and what it's going to cost, without trying to pressure them to sign on any particular dotted line, right? And so again, if we all, you know, live in families and communities, these issues are important to everyone. Last week was the Alzheimer's and Dementia, Alzheimer's Association Advocacy Day. Again, an issue that can face young and old, whether you're the individual with the diagnosis or you're the family trying to support them or the community trying to support them. Next week is Disability Advocacy Day. Same thing. You know, so many of the issues that impact people with disabilities trying to get gainful employment, trying to get connected to their communities are the same issues the rest of us face in various different ways in our communities. So I feel like the more we can share our budget priorities, our advocacy alerts, our engagement opportunities. One of the things I'm trying to do is gather up a list of listening sessions that are happening around the state. Well, you know, I can't follow all 132 legislators' websites and get in their newsletters, but I do follow many, and I try to pull those out, and I ask our members to send me some when they have some. And it's a slow process, but I believe it's one of those things that collectively we could all do together and use as a shared document, because we know that so much of the budget process and the legislation process, for that matter, you know, yes, it happens in those public hearings and those opportunities, but we have a really good opportunity at the local level. Something I'm seeing the Main Street Alliance use very well is trying to, you know, gather their members in local districts where people don't have to travel to Madison to be effective. And sometimes you can be more effective and have more time. So that's the kind of tool, I think, a resource that would be certainly of interest, I would bet, to all of you and others that we work with. So I feel like there's many opportunities that we could continue to explore that would both strengthen this coalition and all of our members.
Can I just ask, can I ask something, just because the question is, how can people get involved with this model? So do you have specific ways that you'd recommend for people that want to get involved in this model, how they would do it? You mentioned a listserv. Is there anything else? This model of sharing.
I would say certainly the listserv in terms of sharing information. I think a shared document space, so that we're not all recreating. You know, I hear all of us are small nonprofits. There aren't a lot of people doing this work, and we're all trying to recreate the same exact things in many cases, or at least the template for those things. So for folks who want to add more particular items to it, they could. But, you know, I think about what we did around the budget, and I'm identifying the issues that impact older adults, and somebody else was doing disabilities, and somebody else was just doing transportation. But imagine if we had one shared document where we could all just put that information, recognizing that we're not as siloed as we think we are. And so I think that would be a great opportunity, is to have a shared space to keep information like that and put information.
And do you have anything to add to that, Bonnie?
So I think that's a great idea, and I want to just take a minute to explore that a little bit. So we do have Dignity at Work has a Gmail address, so we have a Google Drive, and so we could put together a Google Doc that can easily be shared, that everybody could have access to. And so I'm just kind of wanting to get some thoughts from folks of what kinds of information would be helpful to track and to share. So Janet, one thing I heard you say was tracking legislators' listening sessions around the state. Maybe tracking our different, if we're, many of our organizations, not all, but many do advocacy days. So maybe tracking when different advocacy days are coming up and what their focuses will be. What other things would you find helpful to have in a shared document?
Budget summaries.
Yeah. Also, Bonnie, if organizations are doing lobby days, those would be useful things to have, like in terms of a calendar of
Mhm.
events, if you will.
Yeah.
It's a great idea, Bill.
Mhm.
I also think some resources. So for example, I do a lot of training of grassroots advocates. So I have a tool for how to find out who your legislator is, a reference guide that you can build out so you can put in your federal, state, and local elected officials individually or for your, as well as for your agency. I have toolkits that include resources, like where do you go to get good information? And that's a question I get asked a lot, recognizing how slanted some things are. And so we try to direct people to resources that we found to be relatively unbiased. And then we have that whole speech about encouraging people to use more than one source, right? I mean, everybody's got biases of some kind or another. So don't trust just one sole source for your news, right? So those are things that I think all of us probably use in various formats, but we certainly could make them more available to share.
Yeah, that's great.
I think it's worth saying, even that, I mean, I think this document is a great idea. But also just emailing Bonnie or me or other members of the coalition and saying, I want to talk about this. Or when Bonnie sends out the call to, does your organization want to participate by talking about this question? For you to do it. That's an easy way to get involved as well.
Mhm. Yeah, so organizations, we'd love organizations to step forward to say at the next quarterly meeting, I want to share what I'm working on. Yeah.
I would add to what Rebecca just said and say, and also bringing new faces to the table, right? Each of us have different circles we travel in. And so as we identify other groups that are working on some things that would overlap or complement the work that we're doing here, it might be really good to invite them to the table to share what they're doing and see if they have some interest in a coalition like this. So I think it's also, it depends on all of us to bring those new faces to the table.
Yeah,
Thanks
absolutely.
for Rebecca for doing that for this meeting.
Yeah. That's great. Thank you. And that's a great segue to introduce Rec, or to ask Rec to introduce themselves and talk about MadWork and what they do and how they organize, and to address the question of how MadWork does its work with limited resources.
Sure. I did prepare slides. I don't know if people prepare slides or just me talking. Either is fine with me. And either way, I can send follow-up resources with like links and things like that.
Slides are good. Some people are visual learners and some people are auditory learners. So
And I'll make sure that
people learn in
everything that's
different
on the
ways.
slides does get spoken out. So if you're not
Yeah.
able to read the slides, don't want to read the slides, there won't be content that isn't covered.
So
All
I
right.
just need you co-host.
And there isn't a test.
Yeah.
All right, let's see. Okay. Sorry, I lost my window. I swear I've done this before. And then, so you don't have to see everything else I've got. Okay, can you see a slide?
Yep.
Yes,
Okay.
we can.
And can you see my notes?
We cannot.
Perfect. Oh, good. Okay. So my name is Rec. I am the coordinator at MadWork, which is Madison Workers Cooperative. We are a cooperative under Wisconsin state statutes. So we're a cooperative of cooperatives. And we're also a 501c3 nonprofit at the federal level. You can be both, it turns out. So I'm going to do this a little bit maybe backwards from how one might normally do it, which is I'm going to talk a little bit about what worker co-ops are before getting into what we do with worker co-ops, just because I think it makes more sense to hear about what we do before, or like after you know a little bit about what worker co-ops are. So all cooperatives, housing cooperatives, grocery cooperatives, worker cooperatives have 7 values that are the International Cooperative Association's like agreed upon cooperative values. So these is like worldwide. You go anywhere, these are the values that the co-ops have. And those values are voluntary and open membership, democratic member control, member economic participation, autonomy and independence, education, training, and information, cooperation among cooperatives, and concern for community. So those are just like sort of things to have in your mind as you think about this work. So what is a worker cooperative? They're businesses that are owned by workers, democratically managed by the workers on the basis of one member, one vote, and workers financially benefit from their labor contribution. So some local examples that you've probably seen or maybe not seen, Union Cab, Community Pharmacy, Nature's Bakery, Isthmus Engineering, and some newer ones, Tone Madison, which maybe you know as the like online news source, just converted to be a cooperative. There's also the Get It Right Educators Cooperative that is a cooperative of educators who are currently staffing the Milestone Democratic School, which is a local, not MMSD charter school that is focused on like a democratic learning process. So what this means though, in terms of this definition, is that everyone's voice is equal and you can't buy more votes. So unlike a regular corporation, right, where like if you own 12 shares and I own 1 share, you have 12 times as many votes as me. In a worker co-op, we're the same. We each get 1 vote. And because workers are owners, and because there's a democratic management process, there's a lot of job security and there's a lot of wealth building potential. And this is a much more common model in other countries. There are several countries where there are like a proliferation of worker co-ops, including like down to the level of like actually having statutes that require you to be engaged in the cooperative world, or put aside a certain amount of money to redevelop new cooperatives. So why are worker co-ops good for workers? One of the things worker owners often highlight is control over their working conditions. Because again, it's democratically managed, you have a very strong voice in the conditions of your work. And a lot of people report like an increased confidence in other parts of their life. So there's a lot of like people talking about, you know, I feel more empowered in my relationship. Like I'm more, you know, willing to step up and say like, no, we're making this decision together. You're not making this decision. So it's sort of, we think that that has to do with just being in regular democratic process, that you get used to having a vote and a say in things. And also the identity of being an owner. And I was trying to find the video clip with a quote about this, but there are so many that I can't think of which video it was. But a lot of times when there are interviews of people who are like newer worker owners, especially, there's this like very clear pride in their voice when they say, I'm an owner. Like, right, like this isn't something that most of us plan on doing or think we can do. Especially if you're coming from like a low wealth background where, you know, usually you need a lot of money to start a company. So there's just like an increased confidence that's like almost like a sense of pride that I think is really valuable. Even if it's not necessarily always the most lucrative thing, that's a really valuable thing in your life. But there also do tend to be higher wages in worker co-ops. The catch there is that that's not immediate. So most worker co-ops are small businesses, And most small businesses do take a while to get off the ground. So eventually worker co-ops tend to have higher pay rates, but starting out, often it is potentially even a lower pay rate, but that control piece is really valuable. In terms of wages, the other piece is that the typical worker co-op, according to the most recent census, has a 2-to-1 pay ratio, which is quite different than other types of companies where the pay ratios, I mean, obviously like mega corporations, it's like hundreds to one. But even in smaller businesses, it's often much more unequal than 2-to-1. The cooperative model seems to be, well, it's more flexible, and it seems to be able to more easily survive during recessions or other major economic things like the pandemic, for example. It's like the most recent one we've had, but also 2008 and 2009. So the worker co-op census from 2021 says that in 2020, 1 in 5 worker co-ops dropped 50% more in revenue. Obviously, that's a lot. That's scary. But 1 in 3 small businesses dropped 50% or more in revenue. So worker co-ops are coming out ahead on that, even though everyone is being pretty badly impacted. Another interesting piece about that is that during that time period, median revenue for worker co-ops dropped 44% between 2018 and 2020, but hours only dropped by 9%. And so a lot of that is that everyone has a stake in preserving jobs. So a lot of worker co-ops will reduce hours or furlough people, but trying to avoid layoffs. And workers can decide what that looks like. So a co-op can decide, like, we're going to prioritize people who have families that they're caring for and have more dependents. Or we're going to prioritize pooling wages so that the people whose jobs are either more dangerous on the front lines or whose jobs can't be done during the pandemic, those people are going to get some of the wages that we're all bringing in, like some of the money that we're all bringing in. So in terms of the pathways to a worker cooperative, there's sort of 2 main ways that co-ops come about. One is a startup and one is a conversion. So startups require someone or several people to have an idea for a business. And it needs to be a feasible idea. Obviously, you can't start a business. Sorry, I was just checking the chat. I'll get to those answers. You can't start a business if it's not going to be feasible. And I think that's something that people working with cooperatives really struggle with sometimes, is like, how do you figure out if it's feasible and what do you do if it's not, right? Like, none of us want to support somebody in investing a ton of time, energy, and potentially money in something that can't succeed. And also it's challenging for some of us to come up with an idea for a business, especially if that's not something that you've ever thought is possible for you. What would you do if you wanted to start a business rather than working for somebody else? Conversions are where workers purchase the company from the owner. And what we've learned in the last few years is that a lot of business owners, especially business owners who are 50 and over, don't have really a plan for what happens to their business after they retire. And often their business is basically their retirement plan. That's where all of their money is. So they kind of need to do something with it. And those options can be challenging both for them and for the community. So selling to a competitor, the competitor probably isn't going to keep the business open. They just want the list of customers. Selling to a large corporation, they're not necessarily going to keep that one location open. They're going to say, oh, we already have a location 20 miles away. We don't need this one. So there's a lot of benefit to the community from having workers purchase a business because it keeps that resource open and available. There's obviously benefit to the workers. They maintain their jobs. They get to actually have a say in a business. And it's also a really good way for an owner to recognize the work that employees have put into making the business successful, which is true, right? Most of the time, a business wouldn't be successful if they didn't also have good people working there who cared and did their best. And I like to talk about, or like think about it as like, a lot of us have probably had experiences where we're working someplace and going, I could totally do this better than my boss is doing it. And this is an opportunity to like make that actually happen, right? It's to say, you know what, you do actually know how to run this business. You've just been being told how to do things, but you actually do have ideas. So now to get into what MadWork is and does. MadWork started in 2009 as a group of worker owners who wanted to come together to support their businesses and developing more worker co-ops. And we were really active in the 2011 protests because we see cooperatives as inherently linked to labor issues. And there are co-ops that are unionized as well. So it's not like a either or model. We supported a co-op business conference in 2012 in Madison. And that led to members advocating really strongly for funding for worker co-op development under Paul Soglin, who was quite a supporter. And that led to a lot of lobbying and advocacy, and it led to nearly $1 million over 5 years, which is a lot less than it was originally going to be, but it's still a large amount of money, to fund an initiative called the Madison Cooperative Development Coalition, or MCDC. And that was intended to be a coalition of local groups involved in organizing in BIPOC communities, unions, worker cooperatives, and probably more than just those. Those are the things that come to my mind when I think about it, but I suspect that there's a lot of openness to who's involved, I think. And part of how MCDC supports co-ops is by granting funds to community-based organizers and organizations to do cooperative support and development. So they've been our primary funder for the last 3 years, which is basically the entire time that we've had paid staff and money. Sorry. So in terms of the sort of like big question of funding and how to make the most impact with limited funding, one of our struggles with finding funding has been a lot of foundations support things like job readiness programs, which are good, but don't necessarily lead to like a long-term solution for people in terms of control over their labor and a voice in the workplace and opportunity to build wealth. And we tend to not work to create jobs. Like we don't tend to measure our work on how many jobs did we create as much as how many businesses did we support and how many people did we help gain control over their working conditions. So we were an all-volunteer organization until 2020, when we got our 501c3 status in 2019, and then got a grant the next year from MCDC. And we hired a half-time staff person, which is me. We were all volunteer until then. So from 2009 to 2020, it was just volunteers, and people were starting to get pretty burned out, right? So there's funding and there's resources, and like volunteer resources are amazing, but also we're all subject to the exhaustion that comes with doing something intensively. So like I said, funding can be quite difficult. So we have continued to really rely on volunteer labor for some things. Our budget is incredibly frugal. Like there's like not wiggle room. There's not there's nothing that like people are always like, what, your job doesn't like, you know, if you're going to like a social event, your job doesn't pay for your beer. I'm like, no, it doesn't. Like, we don't have that kind of money. You know, like, and we also work, like Rebecca was saying, we work with the other community-based organizations that MCDC has funded to try to maximize impact and support each other's work, rather than like duplicating each other's work.
Mhm.
And just to highlight our programs, our sort of biggest thing has always been peer networking. So even our starting out was, how can workers support other workers in this particular employment situation? We've started a book club in the last couple of years. We're on hiatus right now. We hold regular social events. We have an annual conference called the Regional Rendezvous. We're in our 4th year this year and our first time in person since the first one. And it'll be on May 5th and 6th. So I'll make sure that you have to get some information about that if anyone's interested in coming and learning more. We just started a worker co-op class at Madison College, focused on trade students, but open to anyone in the community, that really goes in depth through how to start a worker co-op. So that is MedWork. And I think we're kind of at time, so I don't know if there's time for questions or thoughts, but maybe that can be during the breakout. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So I think because we're a small group, I think that we won't go into the breakouts. Hey, Liliana. But want to just sort of open it to questions for Rec, or if those of you who are not on the steering committee have questions for all of us who are on the steering committee, raise your hand. So Baltimore's like, yeah, I am. So if you have questions for us about the coalition and how it functions, or if you have questions for Rec about MadWork and the work that they do, let's just open it up to general conversation, and then I'll turn it over to William to talk about the budget and see what we're all doing around that.
Yeah, we had a couple of questions in the chat, one from William and one from myself, just for information.
Yeah.
Rick, did you see those?
I do. Yours came just to me, so I wasn't sure if you wanted it read out, but I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, go ahead.
So the question was, what is the statutory citation under which cooperatives operate? And in Wisconsin, that is Chapter 185. Co-ops can also be LLCs, and there are times when that can be advantageous, especially working with undocumented people. You can basically, as an undocumented person, you can own a business but not work for a business. So you can form your own LLC, and then you can form a cooperative of those LLCs. So there's again, it's a flexible model, so there's often ways to make it work even when it seems difficult. And then William asked, there's no overlap in the business type between worker co-ops and small biz in the data. I don't know if I understand the overlap in business type piece.
Yeah, so you referenced, it sounded like some data points that showed that 1 in 5 co-ops failed or had problems, and 1 in 3 small businesses failed and had problems. And I'm wondering if in the data set, you know, in the denominator, there's overlap, or if those two things are exclusive categories, so that there really does show a resilience of co-ops compared to small businesses.
Yeah, so I was not involved in the data process for that. Our National Democracy at Work Institute, that does a lot of research into co-ops, compiled those statistics. I suspect that worker co-ops are included in that 1 in 3, because most, or at least most worker co-ops are small businesses. I think the largest worker co-op in the US is about 1,000 people. But there are not a lot of worker cooperatives. I can't remember the exact number, but I feel like there's maybe like about 1,000 worker co-ops in the US. So even with those included, it's not going to skew things particularly far. Yeah.
I had a question.
Yeah, go for it.
Rick, you indicated that you have a rendezvous, a get together in May. Can we receive invites to that particular gathering that you are going to have?
Absolutely. Yeah, maybe I can send the invite to Rebecca and get it to all of you. This is the week that we're like getting ready to open registration, so it's a little bit of a hectic week. If I look tired, that's why. So an announcement will be going out next week, probably with the details.
And Rec, can I get the slides from you to share?
Absolutely.
Great. So you work in Madison or in Dane County or statewide? What's your scope geographically?
Yeah, so that's a good distinction. The Madison Cooperative Development Coalition, which is the city funding, can only work within the city of Madison, which makes some sense, right? Like it is city funding. MadWork, we've mostly worked in Madison or like very surrounding areas, but we are open to working pretty much anywhere in the state. And we've supported co-ops in the Driftless region and in Stevens Point area in the past. We are trying to build stronger connections with the co-ops in Milwaukee. I think part of that is I started in May 2020. And so it was over a year before I even met some of our board members. So like meeting the people in another town was just like not going to happen. But there's definitely some cool cooperative stuff happening in Milwaukee too.
Yeah. Do you all have a website?
We do. It is madwork.org, and I will make sure that that's on the contact information on the slides.
Excellent. Thank you.
Great.
Could also put it in the chat if
Oh,
you...
yeah. That's a good idea. I'll do that right now.
I have a question. What would you like to see in terms of, let me say it more basically, how can we support you in your work? You know, how could partners or, you know, community partners partner with you to strengthen your work? Yeah, partnership.
Thank you. I think a big piece is like the human connections that we all have. Something that I found is difficult is that I only know so many people, and there's within that number of people that I know, there aren't that many people who have a need or an interest in starting a business right now. So the more people you are in touch with who might be interested in this model, just knowing about the model and being able to, even if you can't go in detail, just being able to know that it exists. And if you think that it might be useful for somebody, either telling them that or asking me more questions, like, here's what the situation is this a model that could help? So that's, I think, the biggest thing.
This is Janet. I'm wondering, you mentioned the course at the technical college, and I feel like there is a need or an interest for that information in areas beyond Madison. Is it possible that you would ever consider as an organization developing your own curriculum and doing a training that you could charge a fee for and offer to anybody, especially an online course?
Yes. So the funding that we got to develop the curriculum, one of the conditions of the funding is that we will actually be making it publicly available.
Fabulous.
But the goal was for it to focus especially on trade school students, mostly because they are specifically coming out of their degree with specific skills that could be put towards a business, versus like high schoolers maybe like might not be thinking as much about, you know, longer term employment. University students may or may not be, or may not have like something they're specifically interested in as a business idea. But it is open to everyone because we're through the continuing education department. And yeah, we'll be publishing the curriculum. We're basically teaching it right now as like a pilot so that we can see what works and what doesn't work and incorporate that so that nobody else makes the same mistakes we have.
Sure.
And then we'll be releasing that with a like whole curriculum guide that talks about how to teach it. And it's been suggested that we should also offer like a session where we talk about how to teach it. So we may do that as well at some point. because it is definitely a very like popular education style of class, like a lot of focus on interaction and a lot of focus on a group project where they create either a real plan for a co-op or a hypothetical plan for a co-op. But like students will leave the class with like bylaws, some ideas for financing, an understanding of how to manage finances, like all of the things they need to basically start the business, whether that's the day after the class or in 10 years when they get tired of working for somebody else.
Rick, I need to leave for another meeting, but I just want to say I'm so glad I was able to join this morning and hear that presentation. And I look forward to talking with you again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, all.
Thanks, Janet.
I think
And I
Baltazar
think
had
Baltazar-
his hand up for a question.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Baltazar.
Yeah, thank you very much, Rick, for this presentation. And I am aware of some of the work that you folks do in the community. I mean, Julio Garcia, who works at Latino Academy, I know he's part of that world. And we just El Chisme, which is a Mexican-owned business. Students of Latino Academy, they are now looking into, working in that area. So, very, very excited about that. One question. So at Latino Academy, we have, and this is why you're coming about skills connected to, like you mentioned, how there's a lot of funding coming to skill development and, and how, I mean, what I heard was portrayed as a lot of that just keeps, having someone employed for forever. And that's why I kind of cringe at that comment, because I'm like, no, I mean, we need the skills. Like, I'll just give you an example with the CDL program. Folks come to get the CDL, then they want to either work for someone or start a trucking business. Without the skill, they couldn't do that. And I think if we are thinking about advancing our community, we need to think about developing IT skills, all those skills. I think anyway. So I just I just wanted to mention that. And one of the questions that I have is, because we have many students who are opening their trucking business, and Latino Academy, we actually got a funding to help our students to be able to do that. Will that be a sector that, if they were to form a cooperative, will that fit into the work that you folks are doing? And the answer is yes. Okay, so excellent. No, thank you. And then I think this is just a reflection for me and for the group. I think we have and we have many folks. The idea of that business, the idea of opening a business, it is an amazing thing. I think many of our students, they have a job and then they have a business. They have a job and then they have a business. But one of the reasons why that's happening, again, it goes back to, you mentioned that the undocumented. You cannot legally work for someone, but you can own a business. And I think sometimes creating a business, folks do that because that's the only option that they have. And I think I just wanted to bring that, because many times I have a student who will come, I want to do this. I want to work at X companies, but I don't have documents. And, the only thing that they can do is open a business, So anyway, so I just say, and I know we are in a group that I'm preaching to the choir here, but I think it's important for us to remember that, opening a business for many of these folks is their second option. And we need to fight so that the first they get the first option. Anyways, I just, a point of comment, but thank you very much for everything that you folks do in the community.
Thank you. And yeah, I apologize. I was not trying to say that skill building isn't important. It's just been a challenge for us because that's sort of where funding tends to be directed. And there doesn't tend to be very much funding directed towards helping people open businesses.
Can I comment? I think there is a lot of opportunities coming down the route now with workforce development. We are always at Latino Academy trying to see how we can partner. Like for instance, right now, we received some funding to help folks create their transportation business. So I will look into ways of fund and helping and say, how can we share resources? Or how can we go together after some of these funds that can benefit? Because I am I think there is money coming for businesses, but there is not much money coming to the work that you folks are doing, which is so needed in the community. But very, very open to try to figure out how we can partner and move some of those funds, towards that amazing work that you folks are doing.
Yeah, I think collaboration is just a really critical piece, is that we need to be building skills. We need to be building people's understanding and thinking about how they could own a business, right? Like just that perspective change of like, I own something can be really exciting. It can also be really scary, right? Especially as a single owner, like, oh goodness, this is all on me. And I think that's one of the things that the cooperative model is really great at is, you have multiple perspectives built in. So rather than one person either getting to make all the decisions or having to make all the decisions, right? It's like there's both sides to that. And one person sees what they see. They have what they experience of the situation, but it doesn't always take into account other perspectives. Which isn't to say that anyone's perspective is good or bad. It's just like the more information you have, the better you can run a business.
So if I can just add my 2 cents, Worker Justice Wisconsin partners with the Latino Academy, and we also partner with MadWork, and both of you are great partners. So I think I encourage you to partner as well. I think it could be very fruitful. In terms of cooperatives, we have started to incubate cooperatives here in a very serious way. Like you mentioned El Chisme, we're also very aware of them. I think there is more resources that is needed in cooperative development, because 1000% agree with you, Baltazar. This is not, we want people to be able to work, right? And that is really fundamentally important. And in the meantime, and even there are people that do want to own businesses, that's also good to pursue. So what, we partner with MadWork and MCDC, and it's been great, and we want funds to be there. Also, and this is unfortunate reality, the resources are not yet readily available to Spanish speaking folks. And also, there's a reality of experience and certain types of education that are often required to be able to go through the processes. And the fact is they need to be made more accessible. That is why I think that the partnership is fruitful, because there has to be a pull that has to happen in both areas. So, I would love to have more conversations, to see how we can make this happen.
That's great. Thank you. I'm really glad that we all are making this connection.
Yeah, I had a final question for Rhett.
Okay.
And that, do you all have a grants writer? Or is that what you do?
I work 25 hours a week and I'm our only staff person. So for most things, if it's going to happen, it's going to be me doing
It's going to
it.
be through you. Okay, I figured you were.
So, for better or worse.
So what funding cycle do you work off of?
We are basically always looking for things and find things as we find them.
Continuous.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think partially because there's only so many opportunities that our work fits into. I am trying to be a little bit more discerning about which grants I apply for. You know, like sometimes it's tempting to be like, if I could just convince them that this is a good project, even though it's like not exactly what they're thinking about. And sometimes it's like, you know what, like it would be better to like focus on some other things that like build cooperatives than like chase this possible funding that is like, you know,
Yeah, it takes
a
a lot
1
of
in a
time.
million chance.
Takes a lot of time doing grants work.
Yep, we've all been there.
Mhm.
Thank you so much, Rec, for sharing with us, and I'd love to add you to the Dignity at Work listserv, so we can share information about the great work that you're doing. As we build this cooperative document of sharing information and resources, getting access to the training that you're going to be doing when it's ready to be published, that would be tremendous. So I want to turn it over to William to lead us through a discussion about the budget process and our priorities and what, if anything, our different organizations are planning on doing around the state budget.
Well, thanks, Bonnie. So I don't have like slides. I checked with Bonnie, and I think the point here is just to give a very, very rough overview of the budget. I think we're assuming that most people here have a basic understanding. The state budget is proposed by the governor, legislature does some stuff, the governor can sign it or not. He can veto it in part, which we can talk more about if we want to, but he can make some changes around the edges as well. That process kind of happens between about January, February of the odd year, and then it's signed into law in July. So I think the main thing that I think we wanted to spend time talking about is just letting folks know of the upcoming Joint Finance Committee hearings, and talking about where people can get some resources to kind of understand out any summaries or issue papers or something like that, kind of sharing that here as well. So the goal is, I think, just to kind of see what we have and see what we're planning and see what kinds of overlap we have and where there's opportunities for collaboration. So the Joint Finance Committee, which is a committee of both houses of the legislature, the Senate and the Assembly, which is Republican controlled, since both of the chambers are fairly significantly have significant Republican majorities. They have announced 4 hearings in the month of April. And so I'm going to throw some of those details in the chat if that works potentially. So that's April 5th, April 11th, April 12th, and April 26th. In various parts of the state. So Waukesha, Eau Claire, Wisconsin Dells, and the last one will be in Minocqua. Those of you who were involved in this process last budget cycle might remember that there was a virtual hearing. Unfortunately, there is not going to be a virtual hearing this time around. So all of these are in person. All of them are show up, wait around for a long time. Probably folks will have 2 minutes has been the usual, although in situations where there's fewer people, they have let some people go on past that. Maybe just another point of kind of information around those for those of you who are thinking about attending or organizing a group to attend. They have started to, if you all show up in one group and you're very clearly part of one group, the committee leadership has started to sort of just group you together, say, okay, all of you have 2 minutes, speak, which doesn't allow for the kind of process of, 17 people talk about the importance of environmental justice. It's one person talks about that for, Wisconsin conservation voters or something. So, I think the question for us, really is sort of, is anybody planning to have a presence at those hearings? Is anybody planning a lobby day or other kind of advocacy day at the Capitol? I will say that, Kids Forward isn't planning to create a presence at those hearings. Some of our staff might attend a couple of those hearings, mostly because some of us haven't been to a hearing in a long time or haven't been to a hearing ever. And it is useful, especially if you are focusing on the state budget and have a policy focus. It can be helpful to kind of see what those are like, and also hearing what issues are coming up. It is possible that those will be streamed. They tend to be. That's through Wisconsin Eye, which I can throw in the chat if folks don't know about that. That's a free. I kind of think about it as a. It's like C-SPAN's like little brother for Wisconsin. That's pretty cool.
Exactly correct. What it is.
I watch it a lot. But. What, Bill?
I was just saying you're exactly correct. That's exactly what it is.
As far as like summaries or resources, one thing that I want to flag that may not be the most useful, but or may not be the most accessible, but is definitely very useful, is the Legislative Fiscal Bureau, which is kind of like the CBO for Wisconsin, puts out their analysis of the governor's budget proposals in a huge document, about 750 pages. But then they also break that down by state agency. So if you're looking at driver's licenses for all, for instance, which is in the governor's budget, you might look at the Department of Transportation budget, and you could read more about the impact of that. It's really kind of just a summary of what it means, not really digging in to it. There is, after this process, there's a more detailed analysis the Legislative Fiscal Bureau puts out for things that remain in the budget for consideration. So that link to that is in the chat. I will say that we are working on some issue summaries. We have 2 out, I think. And Liliana, please jump in if I screw any of this up. We have an issue summary for taxes and revenue that is out, and youth justice. We are hopefully putting out, I think very soon, an issue summary around immigration related issues in the governor's budget, as well as healthcare. And then mental health, we separated out those 2 because the governor has such a huge emphasis on mental health this time around, in schools and peer delivered services, and just the whole big list of things. Mm-hmm. We also are putting out a summary on K-12 education. Early childhood education and paid leave, and something else. Oh, that's a Rick Perry moment. Lily, do you remember what the 7th one is? Or did I say 7?
You said immigration, William.
Yes.
taxes, education, youth justice, taxes.
I think that is 7, actually. Okay, I just can't count.
Wait,
Yeah.
wait,
I don't know if that's worse.
you said taxes and revenue, youth justice, immigration, healthcare, mental health, K through 12 education, early childhood education, paid leave.
So early childhood education and paid leave are in one summary. Kind of recognizing the, sort of both sides of that
Right.
issue. So I will share those as soon as we can. I'm curious if other organizations, if you all are putting out any kind of summaries or any kind of like resources similar to that.
Well, I'm planning on stealing heavily from Kids Forward.
Yeah, I can jump in. The Wisconsin Council of the Blind and Visually Impaired, and this is Kathleen. We are also, and William, I'm just sort of laughing because that would be the same thing. I'm struggling to figure out, remember what our 7th is. I'm dealing more with the logistics, but that said, yes, very soon we will be putting out what we call our priority docs that focus on what we will be well, sort of continuing to, because, year after year, it seems to be the same song a little bit. But we'll be doing, again, employment, accessibility and civil rights that will, again, focus on especially voting, accessible voting, education, healthcare, transportation, and it's the other one that I am just, similar situation. I've been focusing more on the details. We are going to have advocacy days this year again. We've been kind of playing around with that format, but what we'll be doing this year is in April, we are going to have an opportunity to do online sessions. We're keeping that from the pandemic because we realized that gave us a much broader reach across the state as opposed to the full in-person event that we used to do. And so our online sessions will be over 3 days, the 18th, 19th, and 20th. Not the full day, but there'll be a session on the 18th, which is sort of an advocacy 101 to help. We're realizing that's been a big thing that we need to get people to tell their own stories, and there's a lot of uncertainty about that. So we've really been focusing on how to empower members of the blind and visually impaired community, both those that are blind and visually impaired, but those in their families, employers, and things like that to help spread that. But so there'll be the Advocacy 101, and then we're going to have 2 lunch and learn sessions that are going to focus on 2 of our topics, one on healthcare and one then focusing again on transportation. So we'll be doing that. And then we will have an in-person day at the Capitol on May 3rd, which will be, again, kind of a briefing for the individuals that come, and then setting up legislative, meetings with their legislators so they get that opportunity. Because again, that's what we've realized, a lot of folks get a little bit intimidated by, and we don't want that. And we don't want the same people going in to always represent these issues. We want to get as many voices out there. So so I will do the same in that as soon as our priority documents are ready, I can share that with everyone. And also, I'll include a link, not necessarily, I mean, you are all, of course, welcome to join us on our sessions and things. But, I always love seeing what other people are doing on their advocacy days. So, I definitely have been looking at various groups. Janet's already gone because I was going to tell her, I'm like, thanks for putting all your stuff. It was good it's just good. We're always looking to improve, even if we have a system that we have been kind of doing, which is why we're keeping some of the virtual, even though we regretted having to go virtual during the pandemic. We never quite realized how many people were out there in other parts of the state that really did want to learn about, and were willing to make a call back. They didn't realize they could make a call to their legislator, that sort of thing. So always room to improve. So that's kind of about what we are busy doing right now.
Great, thank you for sharing.
So we don't have an advocacy day coming up for Wisconsin Faith Voices for Justice, but we're partnering with the Lutheran Office for Public Policy and Faith in Place, which used to be Wisconsin Interfaith Power and Light, or Light and Power, I can never remember. They're having an environmental advocacy day, and I don't have my calendar with me, and I don't remember when it is. I want to say May 10th, but I don't think that's true, because the other advocacy day that we're also helping with is, I know is on May 10th, it's Equality, LGBTQ Equality Day, and Fair Wisconsin is spearheading that, and we're just going to help with a faith-based workshop or piece of on that. And I put out in our e-news earlier this week the Joint Finance Committee schedule, and there is actually, if you can't get to the hearings in person, there is a portal where you can submit comments, and there's also an email address where you can submit comments. Peter Bakken from Wisconsin Council Churches, who I partner with, mentioned that last time when people submitted comments to the portal, the comments were not publicly shared. So they're supposed to be shared with the Joint Finance Committee members, but whether they'll be shared with the general public, it's unknown if they're going to do that or not.
They won't.
They won't. Yeah.
No, I mean, they haven't ever been, so I don't think they would be. I imagine they would be. They would be available through a public records request if somebody wanted to do that. And I think last session, somebody did do that. One of the newspapers did that and then published a story about how many comments were related to some items that got taken out of the budget completely without consideration.
Mm-hmm. So if you submitted an open records request, you could get the comments?
Perhaps. You might have to be more specific than just all the things that came to that inbox, but but I think you could get a version of it, yeah.
Yeah, you certainly could under the records law, no question about it.
Yeah. One other, I think we know is coming, although we don't know when. Voces de la Frontera and a bunch of other groups are advocating around driver's licenses for all and are working on a tentative date in April for a legislative action, but I don't think that we know exactly when it is, because I think there's some confusion, or there's not agreement about making sure all the stakeholders are engaged. And Liliana actually attended that meeting, so I don't know if you have anything else to add, but I know there isn't a date certain.
Yeah, they're doing their May Day without Latinas, but then, and usually the next day is when they do their lobby day, but for some reason they decided to disconnect those two. So yeah, they don't have a date yet.
Exactly what Bonnie and William said, that yeah, they had their coalition meeting yesterday, and that was the conversation, them trying to figure out a day in the middle of April. So
All right, so is there anything else that, so it sounds like there's a number of advocacy days. Some of us are leading them. Sounds like lots of us who aren't leading them are sort of engaged on the side, supporting them. So I know that Kids Forward and Liliana specifically is working on updating our fact sheet around driver's licenses for all, to use kind of in concert with that day, and as well as other groups that are working on inclusive driver's licenses. Some of us are writing issue papers, which we'll share, at least right now, with the listserv. Maybe there'll be more of an infrastructure at some point for where to put those things. Is there any other thoughts or questions or comments that people have about the governor's budget? I know it sounds like we have 5 minutes, so also there's that.
Yeah, that was actually quite useful, William. Thank you so much. And those who've also indicated their lobbying days and other activities which they wish to pursue. I think that's quite useful indeed for all of us.
Yeah. Thank
I was just
you.
wondering if the advocacy days should be on that document that you were talking about, it sort of at the top of the agenda.
Yeah, so I'm going to start a shared something that's going to be very rudimentary for right now, but it'll have these notes and links and any shared resources and documents and things that people put on the listserv or send to me or to Rebecca will go in to a shared Google Drive, and I'll figure out how to make that workable.
Yeah, Bonnie, I was also going to add, thank you very much for also sending along our Dignity at Work Coalition vision paper.
Mhm.
Those of you who haven't taken a look at that, please take a look at it when you get an opportunity to do so. It also lists all members of the coalition at this point in time. So that's just good background information for everybody.
Yeah, and just to keep in mind, the list of members on the vision paper is those organizations that formally sent in a membership agreement, but there are many, many more organizations that are on the listserv and come to our meetings and just for whatever reason haven't filled out the paperwork, but don't think that that list is everybody who's part of the coalition, because there's way more that's just not on the list of official. So we just have a couple of minutes left. Rebecca, do you want to talk about like next steps and next meeting?
Yes. We have just a few minutes left, so I don't think we'll be able to talk it all out, but we can just sort of put out a question to everyone, and that is, in our next meeting, what question would you like us to center? So the question that we centered this time, as you know, was about what to do, what you do with a limited budget, how you get most impact. Is there a question that's pressing that you would like to talk about, that you would like to hear other organizations talk about? And though we only have a minute, I want to encourage you to just write something in the chat if it comes to mind.
Also, I just want to put out a pitch. If you would like to present what your organization is working on at our next convening, and we're thinking that our next convening will be like late spring, early summer, so before the budget is finalized, so that'll still be in process. So I'm thinking like mid-May to mid-June, but not June 1st, because that's our annual Wisconsin Faith Voices for Justice annual celebration. So I'm not doing anything else that day. So if people have thoughts about what kind of centering question they want us to focus on, if you want to offer your organization to present, we didn't do small breakouts into smaller groups today because we were already a small group, but if we have a bigger group, we'll try that piece of the format. Yes, and remember to share all your resources on the listserv so we can share with everybody.
Yeah, and we certainly like to thank Rec for joining us today and enlightening us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Information that she gave us, most appreciated.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been lovely meeting you all.
Yeah, thank you. It's been great having you with us.
Before we go,
yes,
I just want to make a plug for Worker Justice Wisconsin's Faith Labor Breakfast, which will be taking place on May 4th. And please come to it. We're going to be talking about worker empowerment. We're going to, and basically how to grow this movement.
Is this going to be in person, Rebecca?
It will be in person, yes, from 8 to 10 a.m. at Christ Presbyterian Church. We'll be starting registration next week.
Excellent.
wonderful. All right, so look for information on the Faith Labor Breakfast, look for information on MadWorks Rendezvous, which I love, that's the name you give it. And look for information on upcoming lobby days, and I'll be sending out the notes. I just need to clean them up a teeny bit. Yes, thank you all so much. Rec, you have my email to send me your slides and any other information you want to share. And I will join you to the listserv.
Great, thank you.
Thank you all. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Really appreciate it.
Thank
Have a
you.
great day.
Thank you.